All right, this is the survey where I think we spent the most money on it and collected the most amount of participants.
We sure did. We sure did
We
spend a lot
sure
of money.
did.
Yeah, sure did. I was very surprised at the amount.
Permission.
I was yeah. You had to send it to. You had to get upstairs approval for that. For that budget.
And it also took the longest to go through the data and analyze it.
Yeah, man.
All right, but I think it'll be worth it. All right, because we conducted a quantitative analysis of Joe Rogan fans.
Oh no! Oh no! Oh no! Oh man!
Oh yeah!
Someone left Chris off his chain. This is what happens when you let researchers roam in the wild. They just do whatever they want. Ooh, what do I have to? Oh, I'm so interested in these questions. Jeez.
Welcome to Psych Papers, a podcast of bad content where we discuss controversial and interesting psychology studies and conduct our own follow-up research. I'm Chris Cole. I have a PhD in psychology, and this is Joseph Tajaran.
And I'm just his friend.
In today's episode, we conducted a survey on how people feel about Joe Rogan and how gender and political affiliation interact with this.
Oh boy.
To start, this is a follow-up study to a survey that I saw put out by Change Research about red flags when it comes to dating.
Okay.
So their survey from Change Research found that being a Joe Rogan fan is a red flag for a lot of people when it comes to dating.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So they asked people to identify red flags when it comes to dating someone. And I think it was, 55% of women ages 18 to 34 in the US indicated that if their partner listens to Joe Rogan, that would be a red flag.
That's surprising because there's a lot of Joe Rogan fans.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know if they specified it, but I'm sure when anyone thinks of they listen to Joe Rogan, they're talking about the podcast, right? Not necessarily just the comedy.
Yeah. He's definitely known for the podcast more so.
Hold on. We may have to cut this, but I want to put this survey on blast for a second. First of all, they are not on social media. They send green texts. They have too many hobbies. What the fuck?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
I have so many red flags here. What the hell?
So I saw this and I was like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what it is about being a Joe Rogan fan that makes that a red flag for dating. So I wanted to explore that further. So we invited 1,000 participants into a study on Joe Rogan. We asked people, have you heard of Joe Rogan? Yes, no. How do you feel about Joe Rogan? Dislike a great deal to like a great deal. It was a 5-point scale. When you think of Joe Rogan, what are 3 words or phrases that come to mind? This was open-ended. If you were single, how would someone being a Joe Rogan fan affect your likelihood of dating them? Would it significantly decrease or increase? This was another 5-point scale. And then finally we asked, do public figures like Joe Rogan have a responsibility to be mindful of the impact of their content on their audience's beliefs and attitudes? From definitely not to definitely yes, 5-point scale. And we asked people about their demographics, like their gender and political affiliation, among a couple other things. Okay, so in the open-ended responses, some people wrote like gibberish or were completely off topic. These people got removed from the analysis. All of the data is available. If anyone wants it, they can shoot us an email. I'll send it to them. We want to be as transparent and open as possible. All right, so to start, just real quick off the bat, have you heard of Joe Rogan? About 70.9% of our sample said yes, they've heard of Joe Rogan. Makes sense. He's incredibly popular. He has the number 1 podcast in the world. So to the question, how do you feel about Joe Rogan? So kind of generally, most people like Joe Rogan, at least a little. So about 38% of people said that they like Joe Rogan somewhat, and then 22% of people said that they like him a great deal. So that's about half. What is it? Maybe 59, maybe 60-ish%.
Interesting.
Are on the positive side, which makes sense. He's incredibly popular. But he's popular for a reason.
But didn't the other one show up as like red flags for them? Like, could you Did you
Yeah.
like Joe Rogan, but
For
also consider that a red
so
flag?
for
Yeah.
that survey, it was people ages 18 to 34. This sample was all ages.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
hmm
Gotcha. Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah. I'm guessing younger people kind of skew less toward him. All right, but that still leaves, there was still a large amount, about 23% that disliked him. And
Okay.
so I kind of used this data and I created categories of fans and anti-fans.
Okay.
And this will become important later on.
Okay.
When I broke it down by gender, we found that more women dislike Joe Rogan and more men like Joe Rogan. So these percentages are broken down by gender. So the pink bits add up to 100, the blue bits add up to 100. So what this means when you see 16% here, 16% of the females in the sample dislike Joe Rogan a great deal.
Interesting.
And so what we're focusing on in this graph here are in the dislike section to the left, the pink columns, the female columns, are higher than the male columns, meaning that they dislike Joe Rogan more. And on the right side of the graph, in the like half, the blue columns are taller, meaning that men like Joe Rogan more. There's still, males and females on both sides that like and dislike him, but just the general trends that more women dislike Joe Rogan, more men like Joe Rogan. Oh, and women were also more likely to be indifferent to Joe Rogan. So that middle column, neither like nor dislike, there are more women in that column.
I would put money that Joe just had a bigger male audience anyway, right? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I put a lot of money on that. That's pretty evident.
Yeah. I'm sure in his YouTube or Spotify analytics, it's definitely male skewed.
Yeah.
And this data reflects that, which is good, consistent. When broken down by political affiliation, Republicans like Joe Rogan. Democrats are mixed. So again, these percentages are by political party. So the blue bits, the Democrats, they add up to 100%. The purple bits, independent, add up to 100, and the red bits add up to 100. So out of the people that dislike Joe Rogan a great deal, they're almost entirely Democrat. You can see on the left-hand side here. So if you're a Joe Rogan hater, most likely you're a Democrat. Out of the people that like Joe Rogan, it's pretty mixed politically. But if you're Republican, so if you're in the red here, you probably like Joe Rogan at least a little bit.
Yeah, because as we can clearly see that not a lot on the dislike side. Yeah.
Yeah. I also found an interesting correlation. The more of a Democrat you are, the less you like Joe Rogan. So as people went up in that scale from going from strongly Republican to strongly Democrat, the average amount that people like Joe Rogan goes down. Now onto the section. When you think of Joe Rogan, what are 3 words or phrases that come to mind? So this was open-ended. And I had to go through all of these responses and determine if they because a lot of people just typed gibberish. A lot of people are just trying to, take the survey for money. They're not paying attention. Or they just type the same word 3 times in a row. I'm like, okay. So I had to read over 1,000 of these entries.
Jeez.
Okay, when you think of Joe Rogan, what are 3 words or phrases that come to mind? So as you would expect, kind of comedian, podcaster, commentator. These are like the most commonly reported phrases or words that come up, right? He's also known for being a host, arrogant, UFC, funny, controversial, martial arts, MMA, outspoken, popular, opinionated, loud, conservative, honest, American. This is nice, but I think it's being too filled up with, comedian and podcast and commentator. So what would it look like if we excluded vocations like comedian, commentator, and podcaster? So I excluded vocation so we could get a closer look at how people think of Joe Rogan. So what's popping out to you here?
I mean, obviously, funny, controversial, arrogant, conservative.
Yeah. So again, this is kind of broad. There's a lot of things about him. Intelligent, controversy. Some people call him dumb, bold, nice, strong, competitive, psychedelic. Yeah. Uninformed, obnoxious, racist, annoying, Yeah, there were a lot of negatives, but
I
a good
mean,
amount
a
of
lot of
positives as
positives
well.
too, right? I mean,
Yeah,
if we
yeah,
got a lot of people here are fans, right? So I would assume we would see more
yep. Hmm.
positive stuff.
Okay, so remember when I mentioned that I split the data into fans and anti-fans?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so now I did that with this data. So looking at
Okay.
just Joe Rogan fans, here's what they think of when they think of Joe Rogan. They think of him as like a good guy, controversial, funny, honest, an adventurer, nice and like curious.
Okay. So yeah, this checks out the more positive
Mm-hmm.
connotation.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Now, when looking at Joe Rogan anti-fans, people that indicated that they dislike Joe Rogan,
Oh,
yeah,
arrogant,
big,
huge.
huge, yeah.
Yeah.
Top adjectives were arrogant, idiot, conservative, conspiracy, ignorant, racist, and uninformed.
Hmm.
Yeah. A lot of blowhard was used pretty frequently, which is just
Blowhard. That's interesting.
which is just
That's a very specific,
specific. And
very
maybe I'm not
specific
with the
word.
times. Yeah.
Yeah. COVID, anti-vax, awful. Jeez. All right, so this checks out too. If you're not a fan, you'd
Yep.
obviously have a skew more
Oh yeah. But it's
pejorative.
interesting to see like, okay, what do they like? Why don't people like him?
Mm.
Okay. A lot of it is people view his like personality as being kind of, unpleasant, arrogant. People think he's not informed on certain issues. Um, People think he engages in like a lot of conspiracies and misinformation, and they don't think he's smart. I'll to put it nicely.
Yeah, in this perspective, yeah, it's
Yeah.
more this. I think that's. I mean, this is like my understanding. The Joe's biggest critique is that he's not informed and he's spouting stuff that he feels very strongly about, but may potentially not true or even like
Hmm.
conspiratorial.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. All right. I broke it down to just men. So now this is what do men when they think of Joe Rogan? What three words or phrases
funny,
come to
hey bro,
mind?
he's funny, dog.
Yeah.
He's funny.
I only listen to Joe Rogan for two things: comedy and MMA, bro. Yeah, the top adjectives were funny, honest, good, loud, conspiracy, arrogant, and conservative. This isn't like the worst list. If somebody
Yeah.
had this list of words to describe me, I'd be like, okay, okay. It's not bad.
Mm-hmm.
Compared to the women's data, women were more likely to view Joe Rogan as arrogant and controversial.
Interesting.
Adjectives were more negative than what men said.
Although we do say
So,
good
yep,
uh,
that's still
here as
there.
well. Yeah.
So besides arrogant and controversial, the top adjectives were good, funny, conservative, opinionated, and nice.
See more of the negative ones
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, if you're looking at the smaller words, which means they were used less frequently, um, those are filled with more negative words
Yeah.
than the men had,
Women do not like Joe Rogan.
from what we've seen.
I think that's
Yeah,
from the sample size.
but
Yeah.
it's pretty mixed. There's still a large amount of women that do like him.
Mm-hmm.
As we saw earlier.
Yeah.
Dating or not a Joe Rogan fan. So to the question, if you were single, how would someone being a Joe Rogan fan affect your likelihood of dating them? Luckily, the largest group here was would it make a difference?
Mm.
Which I think is
Interesting.
probably like most people. Um, I think that's good. I think people use, or actually, I'm not sure. I think why people view it as a red flag is that they're using, if you're a Joe Rogan fan, that's probably a proxy for your like political or, social moral beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe to be a fan of someone, maybe you do have to share some of those with people. I don't know. Can you be a fan of someone while like strongly disagreeing with them? I don't know.
Yeah, there's something I'm trying to contend with right now. So in that other survey, clearly this came up as a larger percentage than other variables, right? Um, as a red flag, But in our survey, we're finding that one, there are actually in the 1,000 people sample, we got a good handful of Joe Rogan fans here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're also finding, like you mentioned, that they wouldn't see it as a red flag, or it would be negligible in comparison to the other one.
Yeah. So again, the one of the differences between the survey and the Change Research survey is that this one is kind of all ages. There's people like 18 to like 75 in
That's
here.
right. It's
Whereas
expanded.
the other one was 18 to 34. So yeah, I'm guessing. My guess is that the younger you are, the less you like Joe Rogan. The older you are, um, probably like millennial and maybe like the generation above us. What is that? Gen X. They
Yeah.
probably more of his Joe Rogan's demographics. And this is still showing that, what is it? That's 29% of people kind of view this as a red flag. It would decrease their likelihood of dating someone as a Joe Rogan fan.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good amount of people. It's almost 1 in 3.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of people that would say, it
It
would
would
actually
increase.
increase. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I broke it down by gender, I found that women feel more strongly about Joe Rogan, both negatively and positively. So to the question, if you were single, how would someone being a Joe Rogan fan affect your likelihood of dating them? Again, if we're just looking at the two left-hand columns,
Mm-hmm.
that's the decrease column. The pink columns are taller than the blue. That's just showing that there's more women in this category here.
Mm.
So this would be more of a red flag for more women. But also, if you look at the somewhat increased column on the right-hand side, the pink column is still taller than the blue column here, 25.5% to 20.7.
Mm.
So kind of women feel more strongly about Joe Rogan, both positively and negatively. And again, these percentages are by gender. So the pink bits add up to 100, the blue bits add up to 100. So for about 42.2% of men in the sample, they would say, yeah, being a Joe Rogan fan, it wouldn't make a difference for me. When I broke it down by political affiliation, Democrats were most likely to view Joe Rogan fandom as a red flag. So again, percentages by gender, the blue bits add up to 100, purple add up to 100, red up to 100. So the people that would say, if somebody was a Joe Rogan fan, that would decrease my likelihood of dating them. This group was like predominantly Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
Very few Republicans in that section.
This checks out then, I feel.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Given everything we know so far.
Yep. And you can see in the increase column, if it would increase your likelihood of dating them, the right-hand side of the graph, there's more Republicans in that side.
Mm-hmm.
So again, this kind of checks out. This kind of matches some of the assumptions that I had to begin with. Okay, to the question, do public figures like Joe Rogan have a responsibility to be mindful of the impact of their content on their audience's beliefs and attitudes? Most people prescribe responsibility to public figures like Joe Rogan.
Mm.
So what was it? That's 74, 75% of people said that he either probably yes or definitely yes has a responsibility to be mindful of the impact that he has on his
Interesting.
audience. Yep.
And this is given that we got a lot of people who do like Joe Rogan.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Oh, and we're about to see a really interesting trend on how much you like Joe Rogan interacts with this.
Okay.
So when I broke it down by political affiliation, Democrats are more likely to prescribe responsibility to Joe Rogan.
Checks
You can
out.
see on the right-hand side here, the two tall columns, the blue sections are bigger, meaning there's more Democrats that say probably yes or definitely yes, that Joe Rogan and other public figures have a responsibility to their audience. All right, and to what you mentioned earlier, we also found an interesting correlation. The more you like Joe Rogan, the less responsibility you ascribe to him.
Mm.
So this was statistically significant. P-value of less than 0.001. Pretty very small R-squared value, so very small effect, but it is there.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this is what this is getting at, is that the more you like someone, the kind of more of like a pass that you give people.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you're a big fan of someone, you're more okay to like kind of like bend your principles or your beliefs around them.
Mm-hmm. Or conversely, could you say that your beliefs are reflected in the stuff that you watch? Like, does Joe Rogan feel like he doesn't have responsibility for providing? I don't know if he has a
I don't
principle on
know.
that.
I feel like he must, right? Just when you're at that level, I feel like you must have thought about that a lot.
I
You
don't
can't just be
know.
like the guy asking questions anymore, right?
I don't know. I think he might see it as, just looking from his perspective, he might be like, well, I'm just bullshitting here. We all know I'm not an expert. I think
Yeah.
um I don't want to
Yeah,
inhibit
yeah.
what we talk about here just because I'm not an expert in something. It's all my opinion. I think I can see that framing for this.
Yeah.
I don't know though.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, he's got so much influence. Like,
Yeah.
once you reach a certain level of influence, at what point do you gain like a moral responsibility or some type of duty to your audience? I don't know. Do we have a duty?
Mm. No.
Hmm.
No, we don't.
Hey, we're just asking questions. All right. So, an analysis of Joe Rogan Fan's summary. And again, just another disclaimer:
Look at
sample
that
may not be
disclaimer.
representative. It should only be interpreted as rough estimates.
You want to be quoted? This is the way to
If we had,
safeguard
oh yeah,
ourselves.
oh yeah, this is the Joe Rogan, like, hey, don't listen to me. I'm just a meathead, you know. And then now that you've said that, you can now say whatever the fuck
Whatever
you want.
Yeah. When you disavow responsibility, yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Oh man. So Joe Rogan is generally well liked. That's not surprising. He's super popular.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, you wouldn't be the number one podcast, the highest paid podcaster, if you were not liked at any
Yeah.
way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think when we see surveys like the one we saw in the beginning from Change Research, and especially when you're around, like, I don't know, people like our age and maybe younger, it's easy to start thinking like, oh, like, Joe Rogan's like a nut, like people don't like him, like, oh, that
Sure.
he's crazy. But then it's like when you zoom out and it's like, oh, actually he's really well liked. People love him,
Mm-hmm.
Fans like him for being funny, controversial, and honest.
Mm.
Anti-fans dislike him for being arrogant, conservative, and into conspiracies. Men like Joe Rogan more than women, and women dislike Joe Rogan more than men.
Mm.
Now, just another little disclaimer: there are still plenty of men that dislike Joe Rogan, plenty of women that like Joe Rogan, but just comparatively. Republicans generally like Joe Rogan, and the more you like someone, the more lenient your principles are with them.
Mm.
I think that was the thing. Maybe I've been like looking at this data for like so long. Maybe it's just like that was the more interesting thing to me, was that if you, and I guess it makes perfect sense. Maybe it's not that profound, but if you like someone, you're willing to like let them get away with more. And I think we see
Mm-hmm.
this with like, especially like Trump, him saying like, I could shoot someone on Fifth Ave and people would still vote for me. Or
Mm-hmm.
I'm paraphrasing, but it was something along those lines. And I'm like, yeah, a lot of people do view it like that.
Yeah. You would put money that if they expanded the age demographic in that other survey, that
Yeah.
it would probably not be as significant as it was for that
Oh,
one.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a little thing with like statistics and like reporting research. If you ever see um survey results or anything that are limited by kind of oddly specific factor, you
Mm-hmm.
always want to like question it a little bit. So like,
Mm.
why did they stop at ages 18 to 34?
Yeah.
Why not 18 to 40 or
Yeah.
45?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is, yeah.
And maybe there are like, they easily might have legitimate reasons to do that. Maybe their research question was like, kind of a question about young people, like young adults, or
Sure.
in America.
But
Okay, sure.
I but other than that disclaimer, like, you could easily walk away from reading that if you're not thinking about it too closely and be like, well, this is red flag for everybody.
Yeah.
As a like represent, like I did when I looked at it. I was like, oh shit. But then
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, until we expanded the
Yeah.
age bracket.
Yeah. I'm guessing it just wouldn't have been as
Isn't that
like juicy,
isn't
you
that
know?
one of
But
those like isn't that one of those like dicey things? You're putting out data that is true, but you're
yeah.
identifying like a subset. I mean, I don't know the reasons for doing it in that way, but I don't I have like I think we both agree like you put stuff like that out, the part about the age bracket is not going to be on the top of mind. I think it's going to be top of mind or the actual things that come
Yeah.
up,
Yep.
right?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's
You
kind of
you don't walk away thinking like, wow, women ages 18 to 34 think dating Joe Rogan's a red flag. That's not what the articles that I saw, that's not what the headlines were.
yeah.
It said like women view being a Joe Rogan fan as a red flag. Yeah.
Yeah. That's really that's not that it's only somewhat true. It should have
Mm-hmm.
been 18 to 34 women. Blah blah blah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, maybe their research question was just on like Gen Z and millennials, in which case, okay, yeah, sure, then that makes perfect sense. If you're still watching, thank you so much. We really appreciate you guys.